Welcome fellow gamers, Peter here with another Esoteric Order of Games review. And today I'm looking at the new one from Gale Force Nine, Dune, Arrakis Dawn of the Fremen. And I say it's new, but actually it's based on an old game called Borderlands, which was originally released in 1982. And it was made by the same design team that created the original Dune game. So here they are with this new version of Borderlands, and it's very interesting indeed. I'll be telling you how it plays and then later what I personally think of it. And hopefully it will go some way to help you make an informed purchasing decision. Thank you very much to Gale Force 9 for sending me this copy free for review. Even though Gale Force 9 owned the Dune license, this is actually set generations and generations before the events of the books. And it's about different tribes on Arrakis fighting for resources and land, and eventually to build sieges, which are the places where they live, and the first player to build a number of these sieges wins. To do that, you have to build up a lot of resources, you have to move your resources around to different areas so you can build different things to help you get more resources and take the lands of other tribes. So in many ways, it's very much a kind of old-fashioned war game. You could probably re-theme this to any number of different themes, but it does seem to fit the Dune theme rather well. And I've got no sort of thematic dissonance going on there. I think it fits it nicely. Each player starts with a tribe, just named after the colours of the pieces, which is a little bit boring, but you know, it's fine. And you start with a number of tribespeople. There are male pictures on one side and female pictures on the other side of each of the warrior tokens. You've got a number of water debt tokens. You've got a thumper token and a reference card. And after players have taken their pieces, there's an initial phase called the Hajj phase. And that is really basically just a setup phase. So you roll a dice to get a number of rock barriers, and players take turns placing these across the board. So even though all these areas look pretty accessible, you can change the layout of the board with these impassable rock barriers. Well, they're not completely impassable, but they do make a difference to the layout of the board. Then you place a number of face-down production sites. These are all then turned face up. Players take turns filling up all the territories on the board with their warrior tokens. And then finally, everyone gets to place one worm token in one of their territories. Once the Hajj phase is done, we move on to the cycles of the game, which is the game's name for rounds. And this starts with an initiation cycle, which is slightly different to the other cycles of the game. I won't go into that, but in a normal cycle, it starts off with a development phase. And this is when players can spend their resources to buy useful development tokens to allow them to do more things. So you can trade in a number of resources to get things like a still suit, a crisp knife, or even to buy a siege. And as I said before, if you get a certain number of these sieges, you win the game. Then we move on to the production phase. And the first thing you'll do in this phase is every player sets their thumper token to a full moon side or a crescent moon side. And that has a slight effect on what resources they get in the production phase. The lead player rolls the Arrakis die, and depending on that result, you find out whether the phase occurs or not and what resources get created. And you use this same method for 3 phases during the game, rolling to see if they actually occur or not, or if indeed the players have to vote on whether that phase occurs. So that adds an interesting wrinkle to the gameplay. For example, if you rolled the crescent moon and you set your thumper to the crescent moon side, that would mean any of your spice development tokens that have a crescent moon on them would actually produce resources. Another important thing is that if you have resource sites in the same territory as a siege or in an adjacent territory, then you get to double production in those sites. Next up is a trade phase, and again in this one you roll the Arrakis die to see if it occurs or not. And if it does, players can make trades. They can exchange water debt tokens for resource tokens or for tradable scavenge cards or things like that. They can also just trade resources. Then there's a shipment phase, and this is where things start moving around the map. And it's a little bit non-intuitive at first, but the warrior tokens don't actually move at all. Neither do sieges, by the way. So the rest of the development tokens, things like still suits, crisp knives, etc., and worms, of course, they get to move around the board, and they can pick up other movable tokens as they move. So you can do one of these shipments during your shipment phase, and you just grab one of your movable development tokens, for example, a worm, and then it can move through a certain number of territories depending on its movement value, picking up and dropping off counters as you go. Some of the specialised items like Jubba cloaks and Kulons and Ornithopters allow you to modify these movement rules or move different distances. Then we've got the all-important action phase. This always happens. You don't have to roll the Arrakis die for this one. And each player gets a chance to perform 2 actions. You can either attack or scavenge, then attack or ship. Now, if you scavenge, you pick up one of these scavenge cards, and they can be very useful indeed. Not only can they give you specialised development tokens like Ornithopters and Jubba cloaks, but they can also give you free resources, all kinds of interesting things, so definitely worth getting. If you ship, you get to make a shipment in the same way as you did in the shipment phase. Now, inevitably, of course, you will be attacking, and if you do so, you place the attack marker in the target territory, and first up, you calculate the defensive strength of tokens in that territory, and then you add the defensive strength of all defending tokens in territories adjacent to that territory. Then the defender can ask other players who have territories adjacent to the defending territory whether they want to be involved in the combat or not. This very much reminds me of Cosmic Encounter and this kind of asking other players whether they want to fight or abstain or whatever. If a player who has counters in an adjacent territory wants to add their strength, they do so. Then the attacker pretty much works out the same thing. All the attacking strength of tokens in adjacent areas and any other players who are contributing to his attack. After all that, of course, you've got an attack strength and a defense strength. If the attack strength is higher than the defense strength, the attacker wins. If it's equal to or lower, the defender wins. If you successfully attack, of course, you get to move into the territory and return the warrior token there to the player who owns it. However, you also have to give them water debts, depending on how much strength you destroyed in the target territory. And these water debts are very handy indeed. Not only can they be used to pay to the player who originally owned them to move through their territories, but you can also spend 2 of them to stop someone from attacking you. So even though you can have 2 attacks in your turn, you may not be able to follow it up with another attack if that player happens to have 2 of your water debt tokens, because they can say, no, here are my water debts, sorry, that's the end of your attacking. And it's also very interesting later in the game when you want to make that crucial attack, but unfortunately you've attacked that person too much in the past, they have your water debts and they can stop you from doing it. The last phase of the game is called the council phase, and this is where the game really shows its pedigree as being an old-timey war game, because it's very, very open-ended. The players can actually vote to not only create permanent alliances between different players, but they can also vote to change the game. So you can decide that instead of 3 sieges to win, you need 4 sieges to win, or whatever. The only caveat is that players need to unanimously agree to the change. I played Arrakis with 4 players, and to be honest, I can't imagine playing it with less, because a very, very large part of this game is the table talk, negotiation, deal-making, trading, all of that kind of stuff. Apparently you can play it successfully with 2, though the designers have said it's a more chess-like experience. I don't know, 3 possibly would probably be fine, but again, you've got the old sort of 2 against 1 kind of problem, so I think 4 is absolutely ideal for this game. Now, it was really interesting playing Arrakis because I was actually around in 1982 and playing games when the original Borderlands was released, though I never actually got a chance to play it. And there are a lot of things about this game that reminded me of those days. In the early days of gaming, board gaming and role-playing, a lot of games came out that had a very strong influence of the war games that were very popular at the time. So you'd have games that were area control games like this, or war games really, and they very much relied on things like combat results tables and hex movement and stuff, so they felt very wargamey. This one has certainly moved beyond those wargaming origins, but there's still that kind of feel to it. So it's not like a sort of modern social board game. It's much more cutthroat, aggressive. There is a lot of chance for making deals and breaking them. So you've got to have the kind of players who are going to enjoy that kind of thing. You've also got to have the kind of players who can understand that they can stretch and bend the rules of this game. There is this council phase where you can all vote to decide to change the end conditions. And you can pretty much do anything. It's not incredibly clear in the rules, however, what the boundaries of this are, because you get the impression that you can do anything, for example, in a trade, and yet in the trade phase there are very strict outlines for what kind of trades you can do. So sometimes there's a bit of grey area there about, well, how far can I stretch this? What can I do? What can I trade at certain times? That kind of thing. Now, back in the 80s, I played a lot of games and I played diplomacy, and I was never very good at that kind of thing because I wasn't good at that kind of cutthroat diplomacy and deal making that some people are very, very good at. And over the years, nothing has changed. It's still not a favourite type of gaming for me. So I must admit that for me personally, I didn't really enjoy playing Arrakis, even though I recognise that for some people they would absolutely love it. Now, in my first game, I had a bad experience with my setup. I felt like I was behind the 8 ball, that another player was running away with the win and that I had no chance of catching up. So I got a bit frustrated. And yet, as the game went on, I did manage to catch up, even though I never felt that there was a chance that I could possibly win after that slow start. So by the end of the game, I was enjoying it a lot more because I felt more involved. But there is the possibility that you'll find yourself, if you're not fully engaged in the gameplay, being kind of ignored and sitting back while you watch other people make deals and do things. You've got to have 4 players who work very well together, who work well at the kind of negotiation and deal making that this game demands. So it demands a certain type of gamer. I certainly wouldn't bring it out for casual gamers. I bring it out for people who like negotiation. I found the rulebook a little bit vague in parts. No doubt some of those things will be cleared up in an FAQ. And I thought perhaps there were some definitions missing of what things you couldn't do, as well as some of the things that you could do. In addition, the combat is very deterministic. You can count up exactly how many pieces you'll have and how many pieces the defender will have. Of course, there is the variable about who is going to back whom, but you can pretty much see beforehand whether you're going to win or not. And in the later stages of the game, there's a lot of counting of counters and combat strengths to work that out, which can sort of slow things down a little bit. So I guess I'm sounding a little bit negative about Dune Arrakis Dawn of the Fremen, but I do recognise that for the right gaming group, this is excellent. I mean, there's a lot here to enjoy when it comes to getting your resources, doing deals with other players, grabbing land, attacking at the right time, making sure you've done deals with other players so they'll support your attack at the right time. There's a lot of fun to be had there. You've just got to be the kind of group who really enjoys that kind of thing. And if you do enjoy that kind of gameplay, I think you're going to really enjoy Arrakis Dawn of the Fremen. Me, I'm not going to play it again because I don't enjoy that kind of negotiation. And that's just a completely personal choice. I don't think it's any reflection on the quality of this game at all. This is a bit of an old school experience, and it actually threw into sharp relief for me how we've sort of got into a certain style of gaming over the years and how we recognise mechanics and they get passed from game to game and we feel sort of comfortable with those things. This is kind of an uncomfortable game. It doesn't make you comfortable or relaxed at all. It gets you into the position where you have to defend the things that you've won and you have to plan carefully to win more things. And if that involves doing a deal on a friend and then breaking it, that's fine. If that involves pretending to be weak and actually being strong, that's fine. There's all these kinds of tricks that you have to bring in to wrest victory from your other players. And that's not the kind of thing you see in modern board games too much these days. So it does have that old school feel. And for some people, that is really going to hit the spot. For others, they might find themselves a bit shocked by this style of gaming. If that kind of thing sounds like it appeals to you, then you're going to really enjoy Arrakis Dawn of the Fremen. Well, that's my little review of this new game by Gale Force 9. Well, new/old game by Gale Force 9. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, just ask me in the comments because I'm always answering any comments that I get either on my website or in the YouTube comments. I love to chat with fellow gamers. Go and visit the website at orderofgamers.com. By the time this review is up, I will have a rule summary and reference for this game all ready for you to download, which hopefully will make the rulebook a little bit easier to get through. Don't forget to check me out on all the socials. I'm there, especially on Twitter and Facebook. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you next time, and bye for now.